This week's theme is social control and deviance. I'm going to start off with something a little bit different this week, folks. I really want you to take this seriously and just try it out, okay, and be honest with yourself, okay. Just indulge me for a second in a thought experiment. I want you to close your eyes for a second and kind of clear your thoughts, and I'm going to give you a couple words, and we're going to kind of do a word association game, okay. Okay, so close your eyes, clear your thoughts. I want you to place an image on the first thing you think about when you hear the word terrorist. What does a terrorist look like? What type of person comes to mind? Does this person have a gender? Does this person have a race or an ethnicity? What about a religion? Hold that thought for a second. I have another word I want you to associate. When you hear the word criminal, who comes to mind? What race is this person? Is this person old or young? If you had to picture a neighborhood that this person grew up in, where would it be? What part of LA would this person grow up from? Okay. So if you're honest with yourself, and we look at data that looks at the ways in which Americans think of when they hear the word terrorist or terrorism or criminality, these are very loaded portraits of kind of the reality behind inequality. Okay, we know that sociologically speaking, that these terms are also racialized. Okay, that since the 1980s, terrorism has often been associated with Islam, and criminality has often been associated with people of color, in particular Black and Latino young people. Okay, so where does this come from? Why do we have these conceptions, and what does that mean? How does that shape policies for communities? When we know that if you go to the FBI's website, and I challenge you guys to do this, look at the FBI, go to FBI.gov, and that's going to be one thing we're going to do in this class this week as well. In a discussion, we're going to go to the FBI website, and we're going to look at the COINTELPRO program. But for something different, go to the FBI and look up types of crime. And what you'll see is you can look up white-collar crime versus street crime. And most of us, when we think of crime and criminals, we think of street crime. We think of, burglaries and stolen cars and all these things. And these things, yeah, if you're affected by that, that's not a good thing, right? But if we look at white-collar crime, we see that it's far more impactful of society. And it's done by predominantly really educated, wealthy white men. Okay, but typically most people, when they think about criminals and criminality, they don't think of really educated, upper-class white men. So then how do we make sense of that? Well, we know we're exposed to media imagery. We know that certain communities are only represented in certain ways, right? And this has a huge impact on the way we see the world. And I think it's an important thing to start with this point and analyze the ways in which deviance is constructed. Okay. If we look at our prison system here in the United States, we incarcerate more people than any other industrialized nation in the world. Okay, we have a higher rate of incarceration than Russia, than China, than apartheid-era South Africa. Okay, we have over 2 million people locked up. Okay, in this country, 2/3 of which are in prison for nonviolent offenses. Okay, mostly poor people. Okay, and what does this tell us? What can the incarceration system and the justice system tell us about our society? Well, it tells us about who's valued and who's not valued. Okay, because we know that if we're just looking at impact of, like for example, on an economy and looking at crime, what happened in 2007, 2008 with the crash of the stock market? It was the largest crash in history of the world. Okay, done by very wealthy people, very few of which ever went to prison. Okay, so just imagine that the people responsible for the crashing of the stock market, and we're going to watch a documentary about that, and that's what your film analysis will be upon. Just imagine if they were any other group. Imagine if they were a group of, Latinos, and they were responsible for crashing trillions of dollars of the global economy, do you think someone would have been to jail? Do you think there would have been more of a public outcry? Do you think the president would have removed them all? That's not what happened. Whether you look at, the Bush presidency or the Obama presidency, none of these guys were prosecuted. In fact, both administrations brought a lot of the people responsible into governmental positions. So that tells us something about society, okay? And so this week you're going to be exposed to a lot. I think you're going to learn a lot about incarceration. You're going to learn about how inequality, both race, class, and gender inequality, are embedded within these social institutions. You're going to learn about how, when we study prisons and we study the justice system, it can teach us about some things that can be uncomfortable, about contradictory to kind of our notions kind of sometimes of naivete about, justice and democracy. Okay, so there's a rhetoric and there's a reality. When you look at the prison system, we see that they're becoming increasingly privatized, meaning private corporations are, building prisons to make profit. Okay, and if you think about that logic, that is a very alarming thing. So you're going to learn also about the privatization of prisons and how this is having an impact on communities of color, especially poor and working class communities around this country, and what this really kind of tells us about inequality. So again, a challenge this week is to go back all the way to week 1 with the concept of the sociological imagination, because we always think about crime as individual acts. Okay, I know it's hard to resist that, but we see patterns. We see patterns of who's arrested, who's charged, and in length of sentencing, all by demographics of race. Okay, if we see these patterns, we know there's something bigger going on. Okay, so really, really work hard this week and approach this material with an open mind, and I look forward to reading your comments.